enforcement. Look, there are a lot of reasons that New Yorkers are feeling anxiety right now. We've got the election just 1 week from today. We had that racist rally that took place on Sunday, and the list goes on and on. We're here today to address one local cause for anxiety that I hear over and over again in communities all across the city: the proliferation of mopeds and e-bikes on our streets. We've all been there ourselves. You come out of the grocery store or the bodega and you're balancing the bags, and an e-bike swerves up onto the sidewalk and knocks you off your balance and raises your blood pressure a little bit. Or you're biking home, as I just had the good fortune to bike up here this morning, and a moped's coming the wrong way in your bike lane and forces you out of it and into traffic. And of course, when you talk to other people, if you talk to parents who are pushing strollers, or seniors with mobility issues, or people with disabilities, and hear from them the fear that they have of getting hit just trying to navigate our crosswalks and get across the street, New Yorkers should not have to feel on edge every time they leave their apartment. And look, it doesn't have to be that way. The changing patterns of vehicles on our streets does not have to fuel a sense of disorder and lawlessness in our city. We can restore a sense of safety to our streets where all users are sharing them and where we've got the right rules, the right enforcement, and the right culture to guarantee safety and comfort on our streets, regardless of what mode of transportation you use. But to get from where we are today, from that very real sense of anxiety that I hear from New Yorkers every day, to the streets we want to have that all users can share safely and comfortably, it is going to take some real change. And it's going to take two things. First, a clear, proactive, strategic management plan for getting at the heart of the problem. And it's also going to take a broad coalition of New Yorkers, people with disabilities, seniors, deliveristas themselves, safe streets advocates, criminal justice advocates, to come together so we can set the rules, so we can make the enforcement strategic, so we can shift the education and culture that we need to safely share the streets of our city. And that's why I'm so proud to be here today to roll out my office's new report, Street Safety in the Era of Micromobility. Let's hear it for the new Street Safety in the Era of Micromobility plan. The report lays out a proactive, strategic management approach to create more predictability on city streets and ensure that micromobility vehicles, mopeds, e-bikes, e-scooters operate safely and legally. By cutting off illegal supply at the point of sale, by holding app delivery companies accountable for their trips, and by making enforcement more consistent and more strategic, we can make sure that New Yorkers feel safe and comfortable regardless of what mode of transportation they use. And I really am so proud that we're announcing it alongside this broad and beautiful coalition of people from a lot of different walks of life, advocates for people with disabilities and safety and accessibility on our streets, advocates for seniors, Workers' Justice Project, and our deliveristas who make their living on and also need to be safe on our streets, folks who have been fighting for more safe and livable streets for cyclists and for all users for decades, folks who are thinking about how we build the city that we all want and that we all can share. Our report takes a data-driven look at the problem and then uses that information to advocate for practical, strategic, upstream solutions. So first, we look at what has fueled the rise of the problem. That's in part the growth in the app delivery companies, who are now responsible for over 2.5 million trips on our streets every single week, yet have zero accountability for the safety of those trips. We look at the fact that legislation was passed in 2020 to legalize e-bikes and e-scooters, but without yet having a real comprehensive strategic approach for safety. We look at the proliferation of cheap battery and vehicle technology, many of them coming from overseas, not meeting legal standards, illegal batteries and illegal vehicles that have nonetheless proliferated on our streets. And it's all added up to a dramatic increase in the number of micromobility users, many of whom, of course, are just seeking an affordable, safe for themselves, and environmental-friendly technology. And yet that rise has led to these feelings of chaos and disorder on our streets. We also take a real look at the data. And if you haven't seen it, I really urge you to look at it. It's on pages 10, 11, 12, and 13 of the report. And what you can see there is, compared to cars, SUVs, and trucks, micromobility vehicles account for a relatively small share of pedestrian deaths and injuries, but those numbers have grown significantly since 2020. So of all pedestrian fatalities, 1.8% of fatalities from 20 to 23, or 8 out of 449, and roughly 4.5% of pedestrian injuries, or 1,276 out of 2,850. And I'll also point out that the safety risks of e-bikes, e-scooters, and mopeds are most acute for the riders of those vehicles relative to pedestrians or other road users. But those numbers are up significantly from before 2020, when there were effectively almost none. And it is, in many cases, the rise of something you didn't have before that leads to people feeling that sense of anxiety and concern about what's taking place on their streets. With that data and that analysis of the problem, and in dialogue with a lot of the folks behind us, thank you, we then lay out a 9-point plan, and I'm not going to go through all 9 points today, but you can look at them in the report, that really aims to be more strategic in how we are solving this problem, to get what the mayor sometimes calls upstream. The mayor and the administration, unfortunately, have taken an extremely downstream approach to this problem, seizing some vehicles, which might make the mayor feel good when he rides a tractor over them, but doesn't do anything at all if a retailer of mopeds just sells another one right out onto the street. If the app company that vehicle was riding for just finds somebody else and another vehicle to get out there at the same speed with the same lack of safety protocols. This is a place where we need an upstream approach to solving the problem, and where City Hall has failed to deliver it. So step one is to cut off the supply of unsafe illegal vehicles in New York City and beyond through strategic enforcement at the point of sale. Let's be clear, the vast majority of the mopeds that you see delivering on the streets of the city without licenses, those are illegal vehicles. They're not allowed to be on the street. And thanks to the state legislature starting in 2025, it won't be legal for retailers to sell them here, and we will have strengthened tools for enforcement to make sure that those retailers, whether in a physical store or online, can be held accountable, and we can cut off the supply of unsafe illegal mopeds on our streets. How about that? Yeah. All right. Number two, another upstream solution is to create a city-administered licensing program that regulates the app-based delivery companies. And I really think this is so important to underline. We have allowed Seamless and Uber and DoorDash to use our streets for their businesses with zero accountability for the safety of those trips, frequently exploiting their own workforce, the riders who are here today, by underpaying and cheating them, by failing to take responsibility for the safety and legality of the vehicles that are doing their business. It does not have to be that way. We operate licensing programs for many different kinds of businesses, including businesses on our streets. And what we are proposing is a city-administered licensing program for the app delivery companies that will hold them broadly accountable for the business they do on our streets. That'll mean safe operating accountability protocols so that the trips that are on their apps have to be performed safely and they're held accountable when they're not. That'll mean a comprehensive education and safety program with their workers. And that will mean, of course, as we've discussed many times and worked together on with Workers' Justice Project and the Deliveristas, holding them accountable for their workforce practices as well and not allowing them to continue to cheat their workers, the restaurants that they are delivering for, or the public who they have a responsibility to keep safe. How about that one? We also propose to curb reckless, high-risk driving and enhance accountability for moped riders who violate traffic laws through more predictable, consistent, and strategic enforcement. That means enforcing specifically against dangerous behaviors. That does mean confiscating illegal vehicles and then going upstream and holding both the retailers and the app companies accountable for them as well. And fourth, and I won't go through the other five, it means investing in high-quality infrastructure, in street design, and in curb management solutions that will make the safe integration of legally operated, safely operated micromobility possible. I had a lovely ride here from 1 Center Street on a largely protected bike lane with docks in both places. We did have one bike rider riding the wrong way in the bike lane, but for the most part, the infrastructure we have made that trip safe and possible. And look, we're here in Astor Place, a very busy location with lots of New Yorkers moving around us, taking many different forms of transportation. We got buses, and we got cars, and we got city bikes, and we have regular bikes, and it's a hub for deliveristas. And at the same time, it's working. You can see that when we invest in good infrastructure, we can make our streets safe for all their users. And that's the vision that we should aspire to, is a New York that makes room for the vibrant life of our city, for the vibrant operation of our businesses, and for all New Yorkers to be safe. And I'll just end by coming back to this great coalition, which I think is so much of what makes it possible. I learned this phrase, mode rage, from our friend Aaron Napperstack, who took off the idea of road rage. You know, you're in a car, you're behind the wheel, and you just get mad at everybody else who's out there. You're mad at the other drivers, you're mad at the pedestrians, you're mad at the cyclists, you're laying on your horn, and you take a deep breath and you realize, okay, I am full of irrational rage that's not making me a safer driver or a happier human being. And he expanded that concept and called it mode rage, which is our capacity to be pissed off at every other kind of user of our streets. So when you're a pedestrian and that cyclist swerves by you or that moped comes up on the sidewalk, you flip them the bird, you get angry. Or when you're on your bike and that moped goes by, or when you're driving and vice versa. And understandably, because sometimes those folks are not operating safely and the rules have to be clear and the culture has to be shared. But let's also be clear, we are only going to get there if we can take a more systemic solution, one that resets the rules, makes enforcement strategic, clear, and consistent, but also builds a culture in which everybody, regardless of whether you're in a wheelchair or on a bicycle or in a car or crossing the street, you know what the rules are, that they'll be enforced, that you have to share the streets with others, and that if we do that, we can truly restore not just the safety we all need, but the sense of comfort and safety that makes it possible for us to share this extraordinary city. That's what this plan will do, and this coalition is what will get us there. Thank you all very, very much for being here. I really believe what we're doing today is a first step in restoring safety to our streets for all their users. And it is now my pleasure to start introducing them. We don't have... Yes, okay, great. Okay, so we're going to hear from some of those great advocates. It's first my delight to call up Elizabeth Valdez, systems advocate with Brooklyn Center for the Independence of the Disabled, one of the sponsors of the amazing Disability Pride Parade we had last weekend in New York City, which was a real flourishing of joy at the possibility of safe and accessible streets for all their users. Elizabeth, thank you very much for being out here.
Hello, good morning. My name is Elizabeth Valdez, and I am the Systems Advocate at the Brooklyn Center for Independence of the Disabled. And I'm here to say that disabled New Yorkers and everyone else deserve safe sidewalks and crosswalks, but e-bikes, e-scooters, and mopeds make the streets a dangerous, unpredictable obstacle course. Comptroller's Lander's proposals would allow the city to finally confront these challenges head-on and make our streets safer for all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. As I mentioned, we're joined today by the Workers' Justice Project, who sponsor Los Deliveristas Unidos, an extraordinary effort to organize deliveristas that has helped raise their pay and bring them together. And some might be surprised that they said, we want to be a part of this project. I was not surprised, because I know that they're a group of people who believe deeply in a safe and thriving New York, who, when I said mode rage, I forgot to mention that one mode is sitting on your couch ordering your food delivery. You might not think of yourself as a road user when you use your Seamless or DoorDash or Uber app, but you are a road user. You are compelling a trip operated by one of those publicly traded billion-dollar companies. And we all, the orderers of the food, the deliverers of those food, the users of those streets, are collectively invested in our collective and shared safety. So, of course, we were in the development of this report, delighted to work closely with Workers' Justice Project. And I think the fact that they are here supporting these recommendations really speaks volumes to the possibility of a New York City where the streets are better shared, and is therefore my delight to introduce my friend Lehia Gualpa, Executive Director of the Workers' Justice Project. Thank you for being here and working with us on this.
So, good morning, everybody. How is everybody? Good?
Great.
Woo! Okay, so first of all, I have to say that I'm not here alone. I'm here with incredible member organizations, deliveristas, even domestic workers who work, who look for work in the street day labor corners. And I'm here on behalf of the Workers' Justice Project and Los Deliveristas Unidos. One, to make sure people really understand, right? Building a culture of street safety, it is one of the biggest priorities of delivery workers across our city. Just to put some numbers as why it is one of the highest priorities for deliveristas. Since 2020, it's been more than 30 deliveristas that have died in the industry, turning app delivery industry in one of the deadliest industries in our city. And also, something that you will find out is that about 60% of deliveristas have experienced workplace injuries. Injuries in their, because either of traffic crimes, injuries because either of street crimes, or because simply the lack of infrastructure that exists in our city. So, and also you will not be surprised that for many deliveristas, they consider this job one of the most riskier and dangerous jobs that they do every day, not knowing if they're able to come back safe, back to their families. And the reason I want to highlight this is because sometimes when we talk about street safety and whether workers really care about safety, it almost seems an isolated issue that only impacts pedestrians and community members. And that is not true, and that is not the reality. Deliveristas leave their homes very scared, nervous about not knowing whether they're going to come back to their homes safely. And that's why we have joined this effort with the New York City Comptroller, Brad Lander, understanding that street safety, it is a workplace safety issue for our community, for our members, for New Yorkers. And it is important to understand that the streets aren't safe for community members, aren't safe for deliveristas, aren't safe for anybody. So we do want to address the issue of street safety because it is addressing the issue of workplace safety for 65,000 app delivery workers in our city. And we understand that truly creating safer streets, safer workplaces requires entire community working together, from elected officials, community members, deliveristas, restaurants, the app companies, even the retail stores. Everybody needs to be on the same page on how we're going to get together and address our issue. Not antagonizing each other, but building community with each other. And this is why we're supporting this report. And I want to highlight something important. This report really reflects comprehensive solutions that brings everybody to the table to have a conversation about how we're going to make our streets safer. It allows community members to propose solutions, allows deliveristas, allows retail stores, everybody to be accountable for street safety. And I want to highlight something very important when we talk about street safety. In our city, I do know that when we talk about how we're going to make our street safety, everybody talks about enforcement. How we're going to penalize and police those reckless drivers, right? As if part of the problem are deliveristas. As if they're the ones who are creating the chaos in our city. Let's talk about what's the real problem here, okay? First of all, it's important to understand that the reason the problem of street safety exists is for a couple of reasons. I'm just going to highlight one of them. One of them, we have a $1 billion industry, which is run by app delivery companies, primarily by Uber, Grubhub, DoorDash, who have come to our city pretty much take advantage of hardworking New Yorkers by paying them less than minimum wage, actually overcharging fees to our restaurants, overcharging fees to consumers, and using our infrastructure without really redesigning a plan that allows to meet allow us to really take into account how their business is going to impact the lives of everybody. Second of all, it is important to understand that it's also an infrastructure issue. We're talking about a city that wasn't designed to have 70% of those 65,000 deliveristas riding in micromobility, right? Back in the days, it was deliveristas who were riding pedal bikes. Now it is the reality that because the distances, the high demand of these companies, deliveristas have moved into electrical bikes out of necessity, not as of choice. And we're here because this proposal proposed unique and strategic and comprehensive proposals. One, ensuring that the city really creates a real infrastructure that addresses the needs of workers in our streets, from building, expanding bike lanes, building deliverista hubs, charging stations. The second one, addressing the retail issue, making sure retail stores and manufacturers bring adequate micromobility that is safe for our streets. The third one is making sure that our government responds to the needs of consumers, of community members, by creating a system where workers can navigate easily by empowering, educating, and treating them care, and most importantly, and embracing them and respecting them as essential workers who continue to feed every New Yorker in our city, especially when New Yorkers need them the most. And we want to see this comprehensive report approach the issue and address the issue and the concerns of consumers, pedestrians, workers, and everybody. And this is why we're endorsing and working with who has been, by the way, a champion of deliveristas from passing the first minimum pay standard that not only guarantees workers' rights, but also addresses the issue of street safety in our streets. Because ensuring workers have more protections, ensure that workers actually have also the ability to ride in our street safety. This is why we have every day, street safety means workplace safety. And this is why we're endorsing and supporting and working, and we're gonna keep working on making sure that our city really responds to this issue with care, with solidarity, and really addressing the root causes that is impacting everybody in our city. And thank you so much for putting this report, and we're here to stand together and keep fighting together.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Lihia, and thank you to the Workers' Justice Project and all the deliveristas who are here today. Next up, we have Jean Ryan, the president of Disabled in Action.
Oopsie. Thank you. Hi, I'm Jean Ryan. I'm president of DIA, Disabled in Action of Metropolitan New York. I'm going to ditch my prepared remarks. We are really concerned about safety, and we're tired of playing chicken on the pedestrian ramps with somebody who's trying to come up or down, and we need to go down or up. And it is a safety issue, and we're very concerned about it. One thing that nobody has mentioned that I don't know if it's in your report, but I'm really glad that you're addressing the issue and trying to think of a comprehensive way to deal with it. Is sound in the e-bikes and the everything, because if they're soundless, everybody is affected by that, but especially blind people, because they're not going to see somebody coming. So we really need to address the issue of sound with e-vehicles. And DIA worked on this fruitlessly with DOT when they were introducing e-scooters into the East Bronx. We never did come up with something that's not simple. It's complicated, but it needs to be done because everyone needs to be safe, and you just have no clue if you can't hear something. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. I think that's a great idea. It's not yet in the report, but I think it's we're going to be evolving this to make sure it really meets the solutions comprehensively. Sound has got to be one of those things. On those e-scooters, another thing that other cities are doing that we are not doing as well are designated places for parking so that the scooters don't wind up strewn all over the sidewalk, making it impossible for folks to get by, and that's something we can change as well.
Also insisted on corrals or some parking for the scooters.
Yeah.
Rather than littering them around on the pedestrian
Yes.
ramps and on the sidewalks, and we got nowhere with that.
And other cities are showing it's entirely possible to do so.
Trying, meeting with manufacturers and the DOT.
Yeah, and we know that they can do it because other cities are. So, all right, thank you very much, Jean. We've talked a lot, and I really think you're seeing the fruit of bringing people together across what might be thought of as different constituencies to come up with real solutions that integrate upstream and downstream efforts. One place where I was delighted to get to start thinking about those things was at a one-day conference held at the Midtown Community Justice Center. And both State Senator Brad Hoylman and City Council member Gail Brewer were there. There's a community of people looking in elected office, looking to work with this coalition with real data, with strategic solutions. And so I'm very happy to call up Danielle Mindes, the project director of the Midtown Community Justice Center. Thank you, Danielle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Mendes. I'm the director of the Midtown Community Justice Center, project of the Center for Justice Innovation. And I'm so proud to stand here among this incredible group of leaders today who work to make our streets safer. And thank you, Comptroller Lander and team, for inviting us to join you at today's event and for your partnership over many years on this public safety issue and others. I started my position at the Justice Center about 2 years ago, and when I started talking to community members and attending community meetings, the number one concern that folks shared and continue to share was feeling unsafe on the street because of e-bikes and mopeds. And as a mother who walks around the city with young kids in tow, I can certainly relate to that feeling. I shared the community's feedback with Midtown's presiding judge, Judge John Drew Wang, who is here today and should be standing next to me. And I also voiced my concerns to him about defaulting to a criminal legal hammer to solve a multi-layered issue that largely involves low-wage workers who have few to no other options and an impossible incentive structure that you heard about from Lihia, created by big app companies and demanding consumers. So we decided to use our position, as the comptroller said, as a convener to bring together the best authorities on the issue and facilitate a dialogue. We hosted a symposium in March of this year in partnership with our Midtown local electeds and the comptroller's office, and the Workers' Justice Project, Families for Safe Streets, and Transportation Alternatives, who are all here today. We designed it as a hackathon and invited top experts on the issues of worker exploitation, street infrastructure, battery safety. City agencies were there, the mayor's office, the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, DOT, NYPD, FDNY, the DMV came, and we participated in substantive problem-solving discussions. Not everyone came to the symposium agreeing on how to address the problem, but every person came and rolled up their sleeves and constructively worked together that day, allowing equitable solutions to surface that incorporate diverse perspectives. And I'm so proud to see the report that was released today reflecting so many of the recommendations that came out of that room, and I can't wait to see them implemented. I'm also proud to represent an organization that's been committed to addressing street safety for a decade. And I'm also joined by my colleague, Amanda Berman, who partnered with Comptroller Lander when he was a council member in Brooklyn, and she ran the Red Hook Community Justice Center. And they worked together to develop a driver accountability program, which is now used citywide as a response to reckless driving charges. So, Comptroller, thanks again for having us and for your many years of work on this important issue.
Right. Thank you, Danielle. That really was a great convening and moved a lot of ideas forward. It is also great to be here with Judge Wang, whose courtroom I've been fortunate to sit in and see what problem solving really can look like in the court. And I've also gotten to eat the burgers he flipped at the summer picnic at the Midtown Community Justice Center. Yeah, it's great to see Amanda Berman here as well. That driver accountability program was the source of ideas for the Reckless Driver Accountability Program, designed to get the most reckless drivers off the streets of our city. Unfortunately, Adams' administration chose to end that program rather than renew it, so we currently have no program strategically targeting the most reckless drivers. What we outline in the report is a call for an education and enforcement program that similarly starts with education, that works to help people operate safely, but that does focus on the most reckless behaviors and escalates up if people persist in them to having accountability. That's what we need for drivers of our cars. That's what we need for operators of micromobility vehicles as well. It is my pleasure next. I saw that she arrived just a minute ago, and it is really great to have my friend Elizabeth Adams here. Elizabeth is interim co-executive director of Transportation Alternatives, and TA for decades has been working on how to make the streets of New York City safer for all its users. And their leadership in launching for Families for Safe Streets to make sure that pedestrians are safe was one of the signature actions that has made it possible for New Yorkers to say, yes, we can share these streets. There is going to be change. When more cyclists are riding, that creates great opportunities, and we need to think about how to evolve our rules and our behaviors and our culture, and that's what the rise of micromobility is as well, an invitation to all New Yorkers to think about the changes that we will need to keep us safe together, and it is therefore was essential to us that Transportation Alternatives are a great partner here. Elizabeth, thank you for being here.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Morning. My name is Elizabeth Adams with Transportation Alternatives. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge how great it is to be here with so many different organizations, leaders, community members, because we know that street safety touches all of us. Whether you are walking, biking, using a car to get around, using a mobility assistive device to get around, we all deserve to be safe. And that is the mission of Transportation Alternatives, of making it possible for each of us to get around in the way that is right for us, that our sidewalks are protected and safe, that our bike lanes are accessible and usable and for bikes and not blocked so that people have to swerve into the street, that when you're crossing the street, you feel safe and supported to do so. And so when the Comptroller reached out about this report and addressing this issue, we were so proud to join because we know there are real solutions, and it is time to put real structural solutions in place when it comes to e-micromobility in New York City. Because there's a lot happening on our streets these days. We all feel it. It feels stressful and chaotic, and sometimes there's a lot going on. And that's what happens when we're in periods of transition. E-micromobility, e-bikes, e-scooters offer a great opportunity for our city. They shift out of car use. They're important for climate sustainability. New Yorkers are choosing them because New Yorkers want more options. More options is a good thing, right? We want to make it possible for people to be able to get around. And that comes with needing to have policies and infrastructure and solutions in place that make it safe and possible and workable for all of us. And that is really the moment that we're in, where we need to be embracing positive, proactive, effective solutions to make it possible for all of us to get around on our streets and feel safe doing so. So there's a few things that I want to highlight in this report and what Transportation Alternatives has been fighting for years. Because frankly, a lot of the tension that I think we're seeing is people are feeling frustrated that industry is moving forward, things are moving forward, but our city has been slow to catch up, frankly, and we haven't met the moment that New Yorkers are demanding. So first, we need to redesign our streets for our changing landscape. There has been an increase in same-day delivery. You all see the Amazon trucks that are clogging all of our streets. People choosing new e-micromobility devices to get around. And so it is time that we fully embrace measures like wider bike lanes, speak to the loading docks and the curb spaces. We are a big proponent of that. We need more corrals. We need spaces for all of these docking for e-bikes to be safely kept in their spaces. And we need, which also helps keep devices off of sidewalks. And so we need more space, which allows for safe passing. It allows for each road user, each mode user to get around safely in the way that works for them with different speeds and different devices. Two, as Lihia spoke to, we need to create a regulatory system that protects all road users and holds the real bad actors accountable. The real people that are responsible for so much of the unsafe streets behavior that we're seeing are these corporate companies that are incentivizing unsafe streets practices. Right now, delivery apps fail to provide any worker safety support, and they're forcing workers to take unsafe routes, to take unsafe practices. Otherwise, they're at risk of losing their jobs. We have learned so much from Workers Justice Center, from delivery workers, and we're so grateful to count you all as partners and to continue to learn from you on how we can support delivery workers on our streets every day. And as Lihia said, as a result, delivery workers from the practices that these companies are pushing have the most dangerous job in New York City, more dangerous than construction workers, which means we are clearly not doing enough to protect people who use our streets as workplaces. And then third, we need to get unsafe batteries and e-bikes and devices off the road and incentivize safe and accessible options for everyone. Proactive tech measures like e-bike trade-in programs and battery regulations, these are all starting to happen. We applaud the city who are starting these e-bike trade-in programs, who are starting measures to have safe charging options out on our street. We need to fully embrace this. We need to do more. We really need to lean into getting unsafe batteries off the streets so that we have safe modes for everyone who is choosing e-micromobility on our streets. And again, I just want to applaud the Comptroller for this report and really the importance of structural solutions. These are complex issues that we're talking about. It requires us all to come together and think about holistic, effective, evidence-based solutions, not leaning into fear-mongering, not leaning into individual attacks or shame that we're seeing some elected officials play out. So I just really want to appreciate the importance of evidence-based solutions, of leaning into what we know works, what's proven, and really addressing this head-on with a really strong coalition and leadership. So thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Really appreciate it. All right, and our last speaker in less than until Gail Brewer arrives here from City Hall is another longtime friend of mine. Bobby Sackman and I go back some decades now, and she has been one of the fiercest advocates for older New Yorkers. Wait until the siren goes by. She's been one of the fiercest advocates for older New Yorkers and making sure we have an age-friendly city, one that works for New Yorkers as they age, because that is the city that works for all New Yorkers. Bobby Sackman.
Thank you. A lot of what I do now goes back decades, so it's nice to
Our friendship goes back decades, that's all I know.
Right. Hi, I'm Bobby Sackman, and I have been for many decades. I know some of you folks advocating for older adults. I worked for 28 years for Live On New York, and I'm now a proud member of Jews for Racial. Is this on?
Yeah, but I mean, to take it out of the stand. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I'm now a proud member of Jews for Racial and Economic Justice. Thank you for your report. I have to admit, I've learned a lot today. I haven't been on this side of it as much as I've been on this side with my friends of what the hell is going on in this city. And we talk about that over dinner, over wine, all the time. And we feel like we're being left behind. So I think what I wrote out some stuff. I'm not going to say it all, but I feel like my main message is that there's 1.8 million people in this city over the age of 60. And we are the fastest growing part of the city's population. Take that as you will. It's a fact. We're bigger than the whole city of Philadelphia. I love that statistic, actually. So it's all to say that we are part of the future. And so when planning happens, please include older adults in that planning. I know that's your effort today, and I applaud this report. Like I said, I hadn't seen it, and I think it's amazing the thinking that's gone into it. As somebody who's done advocacy for years, I know that this is the kind of beginning and start you have to make. So I just want to add, that's really all I wanted to add to today, is that we can't all ride bikes to go shopping or get around. We may not even want to, but we certainly can't. And as this city ages, your plans for bike riding and for other ways to get around, please take into account what you see on the streets every day, and that's a lot of older New Yorkers and people with disabilities. And so I think that's my only message, and I applaud the work you're all doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobby. I love the idea of the seniors of New York City taking on the people of Philadelphia. Although today I wish maybe the seniors of New York City could vote in Philadelphia, but we're not advocating that. We're just. But I do think what Bobby is speaking to is really a good way of ending here. You know, a lot of New Yorkers really feel that what the hell is going on? We just want to be safe on our streets. We want to be able to get to and from the grocery store. We want to be able to get in and out of our homes. So much of what happens in the city is outside on the sidewalk and on our streets. That's why we love it. It's what's magical about it. You've got to be safe and you've got to feel comfortable on your streets. It's understandable why that leads to a lot of anger, that mode rage that I talked about. What we need now are real solutions, strategic, proactive, that'll confront illegal vehicles, that'll hold app companies accountable, that'll make our enforcement more strategic, that'll change the culture of our street usage so we can have safe, comfortable, and harmonious streets for every single New Yorker, regardless of how they get around. So let's try. We didn't do much chanting yet, so why don't we do what do we want? Safe streets. When do we want them? What do we want? Safe streets. When do we want them? Now. What do we want? Safe streets. When do we want them? Now. I want to thank a couple of people who did the work to make this happen. The primary author here is Sindhu Bharadwaj. Thank you, Sindhu. Thank you to our Deputy Comptroller for Policy, Annie Levers. And to everybody in our office. Nick Astor, who leads our work with people with disabilities, is here. and a great crew of folks and all everybody who joined us today. I do think that Gail Brewer is on her way. I'm not sure by what mode of transportation, and whenever she knows she's not making it. Okay, all right. Well, Gail was going to be here today, so you can follow up with her afterwards, but we will now take your questions. Kat's going to... Yeah.
How will a licensing program for the companies relate to the pushes that we see state lawmakers and city lawmakers that are kind of putting the onus more on individuals pushing to license the delivery workers? How will a regulation of the companies relate to that? Will it end up leading to licensing having to be done for the delivery workers? And how will you get companies to go against their desire for profit and use their algorithms for safety? I mean, it seems like the reason they're using the algorithms for speed is because it makes them more money. So what will get them to do the opposite of that?
Yeah, these are great questions, and this is why the licensing program is needed in the first place. So there's a few models here. Taxi and Limousine Commission has an app, essentially an app delivery licensing program that licenses Uber and Lyft and requires them to provide regular data that is part both of their how many vehicles are out there, because there's a set of traffic questions, what is the pay, and also about safety and whether the vehicles that are being used as part of that business are operating safely. There's also fleet management approaches where you are licensing. And so the idea here is that the city will create a license program that Seamless, Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber, anybody else who wants to use the streets for the business of their deliveries will have to get that license. They'll have to share their trip data with the city, and that's part of making sure that they're complying with their obligations under the pay law, but that is also the opportunity to get at safety and at who the drivers are without having to license the individual drivers, because each one of those trips, Uber and Seamless and DoorDash know exactly what time the pickup and drop off was, how fast it went, what route it took, and if there is a violation on that trip, that information will be available for between the city and the companies once the licensing program exists. So it'll be possible to design safe operating requirements and accountability procedures that mean that the apps have to change their approach to how they work with the drivers. Yes, of course they want to get the food there while it's still hot, but if they have a legal obligation to make sure it's on a safe vehicle, the vehicle is being operated safely, and that the city will see that trip when the reporting is done. Now you can manage the fleet as a whole and make sure that you're operating it in a way that's what you've got to do to keep your license, because if you don't, if you violate the rules, whether that's in worker protection and worker pay, or you violate the rules for safety, part of what the licensing will do is make clear at what point your license could be suspended and at what point your license could be revoked.
So the workers will be accounted for by their profiles, not by some sort of new licensing program that has to license individuals?
Well, remember, the apps know who the apps have the worker, know who the worker is. The workers have to show their vehicles when they get hired, and the trips themselves, the app know what worker is performing them. So all that information is already available. The city doesn't have to create a new program to license drivers if it licenses the apps and requires them to provide all that information to the city.
Okay. I just have one more question. So, you talk about people feeling unsafe and like getting to the heart of the issue. And you ended your presentation with that this is all going to help like restore safety to the city. But I'm seeing a little bit of a disconnect between like what Lihia talked about with the safety of the actual delivery workers, which we know their safety is determined by the car drivers on the road and the design of the streets. And what you're talking about is like a perceived
I mean, I feel passionately as well about the need to do more to deal with reckless driving. As I mentioned earlier, I was the lead sponsor of the Reckless Driver Accountability Act, which created the Dangerous Vehicle Abatement Program, and I was extremely angry when the Adams administration allowed that program to lapse with no plan whatsoever to do anything to confront reckless driving in the city. So I remain a big advocate of restoring the Dangerous Vehicle Abatement Program, of learning the lessons from that pilot, and of moving back to a model that holds reckless drivers accountable for the danger they pose to pedestrians, to deliveristas, to themselves, and to everyone else. So I really totally agree with you that that is necessary. But as Lahia said, a lot of what we're recommending in here does have the potential to keep deliveristas safer. They're the ones who are put at risk most of all by the incentives that the apps currently force for them to move too quickly through the streets, and the pullback from that will be the licensing program that we propose.
Max has been waiting from Hellgate.
Yeah, kind of took it a little bit, so I'm not going to try to, beat this to a pulp here. But, according to our report, 1.8% of all pedestrian fatalities, 4.5% of all pedestrian injuries. Very small numbers as compared to cars, right? And you're looking at what is the leading killer on city streets. It's cars and street safety. And it seems like a lot of anchored resources and attention is paid to deliveristas and moped drivers as somehow making streets less safe when we know statistically.
So again, I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record. I mean, I agree. I spent a lot more ink and political capital on passing the law, creating the Reckless Driver Accountability Program, working with the Center for Justice Innovation to create the Driver Accountability Program that now operates around in the boroughs around the city. The Adams administration is not doing enough on reckless driving, and I am passionate about restoring those programs. And the infrastructure work that we talked about here today is part of more comprehensive infrastructure. I was lucky to have a safe bike lane to ride here from City Hall on. That's because of advocacy that folks did, but the Adams administration is embarrassingly far behind in building out the protected bike lanes. So, do we need a more comprehensive? This is not we call this a comprehensive approach to addressing issues of micromobility, not a comprehensive approach to addressing issues more broadly of street safety. We need to restore the Reckless Driver Accountability Program. We need to get back on track building the safe infrastructure that is required, and we also need a strategic approach to enforcement in driving, 100%. But it is true that even though those numbers are relatively low percentages of higher of injuries than of fatalities, but low of both of them, but because they've come out of nowhere and it just wasn't a thing you had to think about before. I mean, I think you guys, I'm sure, feel it yourselves too, and if you talk to people, it really is a dramatically felt sense that a very broad set of New Yorkers have, that the proliferation of moped and e-bike use has grown in a way that our regulation and culture has not kept up with, and that's stressing people out on the streets of our city, and we've got to do something to restore a sense of safety on our streets if we're going to be able to do any of those other things. I want a city that has more places like Astor Place, more places where we invest in the infrastructure, more places where we create plazas and protected bike lanes and things like the 34th Avenue Open Street. I don't mean to go on and on, but I'll take the 34th Avenue Open Street. They worked so hard to create this beautiful piece of pedestrian and open space infrastructure, and if you talk to them, it's being wrecked by the mopeds and e-bikes. We've got to do something to make sure we have a real approach to micromobility in order to restore the possibility of more broadly safe streets and a livable streets infrastructure across the city. They got it today, so we have given it to them. Let me take this. Well, let me just say, I mean, I'm here today in my comptroller capacity, and many of the people who are here with us are here today in their 501c3 capacity. So I don't want to implicate anyone in my mayoral run, but I will answer your questions. I just want to make that clear. This is a comptroller event. All right. Look, I think if you look in the report, you'll see it really gets at this question. It's exactly the right question. We need strategic enforcement, but that's not heavy-handed and that costs people the ability to earn their living. And that's why, we design an approach that starts with with the sellers of illegal vehicles. And that looks at the app companies and tries to build in responsibility to them to onboard people with safe vehicles, with education practices, and with algorithms that don't give them an incentive for dangerous behavior. We do propose more strategic enforcement, which does have to happen as well. That means making sure it's clear to officers what the behaviors that we most want them focusing on, and we outline them in the report. What that will add up to is a set of incentives where, look, the vast majority of deliveristas would have the ability to operate safely. Those small percentage, just like the small percentage of drivers who drive recklessly, will eventually risk losing we propose in the Reckless Driver Accountability Program that top 1% of most reckless drivers could ultimately have their cars confiscated. The program we imagine here will also make clear if you persistently violate the rules, even after they're made clear to you, then you could have your vehicle confiscated or not continue to be able to operate on the streets of the city. But that's really the goal, is an enforcement regime that gives the vast majority of people incentives to operate safely. What we're doing now is very random and doesn't change culture or behavior more broadly. Thank you all very much. Appreciate you guys a lot. This was great. All right, so now I'm going to switch to off-topic, which means I might veer into being a mayoral candidate. You don't have to leave, but I don't want to implicate anybody in my run, so I'll say thank you. Because the answer to your first question is absolutely. I mean, I plan to make this, when I say what I'm running on is that New Yorkers are desperate for a safer, more affordable, more livable, and better run city. This is one great example. We can have a safer and more livable streets if we have a more strategic approach to getting there, and that's got to come from City Hall.
Comptroller, I want to ask you about the relationship between the mayor and former President Trump. On Saturday, he was asked if he believes that Trump was a fascist. He says no. He also said he had a right to have this rally at Madison Square Garden, and then we see some racist remarks at that rally. So I just want to get your comments on that, and also what some people have been saying is a clear attempt for a pardon.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the mayor's comments in advance of the rally were atrocious. I mean, of course, if Madison Square Garden grants Donald Trump the ability to have a rally, then the city's responsibility is to keep it safe, and it was appropriate to say, all right, we're going to have an approach to keeping it safe. But you saw what happened at it. It was hideous. It was racist. It was vile. Yes, I agree with the vice president, fascist. And for the mayor to apologize for it, to tell people to calm down instead of be clear about the threats to our city, the threats to our neighbors, the threats to women, people who need abortions. Who knew that they would call Puerto Rico an island of trash? I mean, outrageous. And the mayor should have said in advance, we're going to keep people safe at this rally because that's our obligation, but we don't want a fascist president, and we don't want a president who violates the basic ideas, the values of what New York City stands for. And I was not, nowhere near, I was not at the rally, but I was at the Al Smith dinner last week. And yeah, it sure looked to me like the mayor was thinking, how do I get a pardon from this guy? And that terrifies me, and I think it should really enrage New Yorkers.
Any other off topic?
All right. Thank you all. Really appreciate your coming.